I can't control myself, warned the virgin Mafia boss to the obese woman he saved. On a stormy night, a silent killer drags a brave baker out of a bullet-filled shop and tells her the one thing he can't control is himself. He's a virgin Mafia boss who fears his own desire. She's the woman he saved, trapped in his world for protection. But when a simple locket hides a deadly secret that could destroy a crime family, every door locks, every shadow watches, and the safest place is his arms. Then the unthinkable hits. Someone inside his circle wants her sold, and a clue says he saved her once before, long before tonight. As cars chase, guns flash, and their heartbeat gets louder than the sirens, one truth burns. He's lethal to everyone else, gentle only to her. If he lets go of control, does she live? Or does the city burn? And when her past and his vow collide, which will break first, the war or his last line of restraint? Through rain-slicked streets, the black SUV carved a path between pools of streetlight, each turn precise and controlled despite their speed. Lena's fingers clutched her locket, the brass warm against her palm as her other hand gripped the leather seat. The vehicle's interior smelled of expensive leather and gun oil, a combination that made her stomach clench. 3 minutes out, Dima called from the front seat, his voice steady as he took another corner. No tails. Mikhail sat beside her, his body rigid with tension. Water dripped from his dark hair onto the collar of his suit, but he seemed oblivious to the discomfort. His eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, one hand resting near his holster, while the other remained close to Lena without touching her. The ledger they mentioned, Mikhail said, his voice low and controlled. What did they mean? Lena shook her head, droplets of water falling from her own soaked hair. I don't know. The only ledger I have is for the bakery's accounts. Her voice cracked slightly. Oh God, Lila. She's safe, Mikhail cut in. I had men watching the shop. They'll ensure she gets home. The city lights continued to blur past their windows, and Lena tried to steady her breathing. The events at the bakery played on repeat in her mind. The crash of the back door, the metallic smell of fear, the deafening gunshots, and Mikhail, appearing like a deadly shadow, moving with lethal grace. Your hands are shaking, Mikhail observed quietly. Lena looked down at her trembling fingers, still wrapped around the locket. Yeah, well, it's not every day I watch someone gun down 3 men in my kitchen. She meant it to sound sharp, but her voice wavered. A muscle ticked in Mikhail's jaw. They would have killed you. I know. And she did know. She'd seen it in their eyes, in the way they'd held their weapons. Thank you, she added softly. The SUV slowed as Dima guided them into an underground parking garage. The fluorescent lights overhead created stark shadows that danced across their faces. Lena caught glimpses of other vehicles, all expensive, all black, as they passed. We're here, Dima announced, pulling into a reserved spot near an elevator. Clear perimeter. Mikhail moved with fluid efficiency, opening his door and scanning the area before coming around to Lena's side. When he opened her door, she noticed how he positioned himself between her and any potential threat, his broad shoulders creating a protective wall. Stay close, he murmured, one hand settling at the small of her back as he guided her toward the elevator. The touch sent warmth through her despite her wet clothes and the garage's chill. Dima took point, his movements precise as he checked the elevator before allowing them to enter. Lena watched him punch in a code and they began to ascend. The safe house is on the top floor, Mikhail explained, his voice still tight with tension. We control the entire building. You'll be secure here. Lena's fingers found her locket again, twisting the chain. For how long? As long as necessary. His answer was absolute, brooking no argument. The elevator opened directly into a vast apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the rain-drenched city. Despite the luxury of the space, all sleek furniture and modern art, Lena noticed the tactical positioning of everything, the clear lines of sight, the multiple exit points. Dima moved through the space with practiced efficiency, checking rooms and communications devices. Perimeter secure, I'll be downstairs monitoring feeds. Mikhail nodded once, and Dima disappeared back into the elevator, leaving them alone. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of rain against the windows and their breathing. You're soaked through, Mikhail finally said, his eyes tracking water droplets that fell from her clothes to the hardwood floor. There are clothes in the bedroom. First door on the right. You should change before you catch cold. Lena almost laughed at the practicality of his concern, given everything that had happened. Right. Because pneumonia is definitely my biggest worry right now. Something flickered in his ice blue eyes. Perhaps frustration, perhaps something else. Lena. He spoke her name like a warning, like a prayer. What aren't you telling me? She demanded, turning to face him fully. Those men weren't random thugs looking for cash. They knew what they wanted, the ledger. And you were there too quickly. You were watching my bakery. Why? Mikhail's expression remained carefully neutral, but tension radiated from his body. It's complicated. Uncomplicated, she shot back, fear and adrenaline making her bold. 3 men just died in my kitchen. I deserve answers. He moved closer, and Lena had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Water dripped from both of them, creating small pools where they stood. What I know could put you in more danger, he said, his voice rough. The less you know, the safer I am, Lena interrupted. I think we're past that point, don't you? His hands clenched at his sides, and Lena remembered his words from the alley. I can't control myself. The raw emotion in his voice then had been at odds with his usual iron control. The clothes, he said finally, taking a deliberate step back. Change first, then we'll talk. Lena wanted to argue, but exhaustion was starting to seep into her bones, and her wet clothes were becoming uncomfortable. Fine, but don't think this conversation's over. As she walked toward the bedroom, she felt his eyes on her, heavy with unspoken words and promises of protection she hadn't asked for but desperately needed. The safe house was Spartan, all concrete walls and exposed pipes. A single bulb cast harsh shadows across metal folding chairs and a worn sofa, the tang of bleach mixed with salt air from the harbor making Lena's nose twitch. Mikhail guided her to sit at a metal table, his movements precise as he retrieved a first aid kit from a cabinet. He pulled up a chair beside her, close enough that his knee brushed hers. Without speaking, he took her hand, palm up, examining the cut she'd gotten from broken glass during their escape. This needs stitches, he said, voice low and controlled. He began laying out supplies with military efficiency. Antiseptic, needle, thread, gauze. Lena watched him work, noting how his huge hands could be so gentle. Are you going to tell me what's happening now? The antiseptic stung as he cleaned the wound. The men who broke in, they work for the Russo family. Rivals of yours? She tried not to flinch as he started stitching. Yes. His focus remained on her palm. They were looking for a ledger, financial records that could damage their organization. Someone connected you to it. That's ridiculous. I run a bakery. The only ledgers I have are full of flour orders and payroll. His jaw tightened. Someone thinks differently. The needle dipped in and out of her skin with precise movements. Lena watched blood well up around the black thread, her mind racing. This is why you've been watching my bakery. It wasn't a question, but he nodded once. We intercepted chatter about a planned hit. I stationed men nearby. Anger flared in her chest. So you knew I was in danger and didn't warn me? My staff could have been killed. I was handling it. Handling it? She tried to pull her hand away, but his grip tightened. You don't get to handle my life, Mr. Volkov. His ice blue eyes finally met hers. Mikhail, he corrected quietly. Fine. Mikhail. She took a steadying breath. If you want my cooperation, we do this on my terms. Something flickered in his expression. Respect, maybe. Name them. My staff stays paid, the bakery stays open, and my name stays off any police reports about tonight. He finished the last stitch before responding. In exchange, I'll stay under your protection for 72 hours, give you time to sort this out. She lifted her chin. But I'm not your prisoner, and I won't be treated like one. Mikhail began wrapping gauze around her palm. Agreed. But you follow security protocols. No arguments. Deal. She flexed her bandaged hand experimentally. Now make your calls. He pulled out a phone, first calling someone named Katya. His Russian was too fast for Lena to follow, but she caught enough to know he was arranging financial protection for her business. Next, he called Lila. There's been an incident at the bakery, he said, his English clipped and professional. We need you to coordinate a cover story, plumbing emergency. Lena could hear Lila's worried voice through the speaker. Is Lena okay? I'm fine, Lena called out. Just do what he says, please. I'll explain everything soon. While Mikhail finished giving Lila instructions, Dima slipped in through a side door. Plates are swapped. No cameras caught the switch. Mikhail nodded in acknowledgement. After ending the call, he moved to the door, positioning himself where he could see both entrances. His gun appeared in his hand, not pointed but ready. Lena watched him settle into his guard position, noting how naturally he held the weapon. How many nights had he spent like this, she wondered, protecting someone else's life? The thought should have frightened her, but instead, it made her chest tight with an emotion she couldn't name. "You should rest," he said, not looking at her. "It's been a long night." The adrenaline crash was hitting her hard now. The sofa looked uninviting, but her legs felt heavy as she walked to it. Before she could sit, Mikhail shrugged out of his coat one-handed, never taking his eyes off the door. "Take it," he said, holding the coat out to her. "It's cold in here." The leather was still warm from his body when she wrapped it around herself. It smelled like gunpowder and expensive cologne. She curled onto the sofa, tucking her feet under her, and let the weight of his coat shield her from the harsh light. Despite her determination not to appear weak, exhaustion pulled at her. The sofa springs creaked as she shifted, trying to find a comfortable position. The bulb buzzed overhead, a counterpoint to the distant sound of boats in the harbor. She dozed fitfully, waking at small sounds. Dima's boots on the stairs, Mikhail adjusting his position, the building settling around them. Each time she opened her eyes, Mikhail was there, a solid presence between her and any threat. The windows slowly began to lighten, transforming from black mirrors to gray squares of dawn. Lena watched the color change, thinking about her kitchen floor covered in blood, about the day's orders that wouldn't be filled, about how quickly normal life could shatter. "We'll go back at opening," Mikhail said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Assess the damage. Set guards." She pushed herself up on one elbow. "You think they'll try again?" "They're desperate." His fingers tightened on his gun. "Desperate men make mistakes. Like breaking into a bakery." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Like that." Lena sat up fully, his coat pooling around her waist. "Will you tell me the rest? About why they think I have their ledger?" "When it's safer." He finally looked at her, his eyes softening slightly. "For now, let me do my job." She wanted to argue, but the determination in his stance told her it would be pointless. Instead, she nodded, pulling his coat tighter around her shoulders as dawn crept into the safe house, painting everything in shades of gray. The sky was barely light when they pulled up to butter and blood orange. Lena's breath caught at the sight of her beloved storefront. Spiderweb cracks radiated across the front window, where bullets had struck, transforming the cheerful display into a fractured mirror of violence. Yellow police tape fluttered in the morning breeze. Mikhail moved first, scanning the street before opening her door. His team spread out with practiced efficiency, 2 men checking the perimeter while another started unloading plywood sheets from a van. Inside, the damage was surgical. A single bullet hole pierced her industrial mixer's steel bowl, dead center, a warning shot. Lena ran her fingers over the cold metal, imagining the precision it took to place that shot. Not random violence, a message. "They knew exactly what they were doing," she said quietly. Mikhail's jaw tightened. "Yes." His team worked silently around them, installing cameras in blind spots and boarding up windows. One of them, Pavel, she thought she heard Mikhail call him, returned with a tray of coffee cups from the florist next door. "For Marta and her staff," Mikhail explained. "Keep them happy. They'll help contain rumors." Lena nodded, understanding the strategy. Her neighborhood was tight-knit, gossip traveled fast, but so did loyalty, if properly cultivated. "Your apartment isn't safe," Mikhail said, his voice low and firm. "They'll have it watched." "I'm not leaving my business. Not asking you to." He pulled out his phone, tapped briefly. "Check your account." Lena's phone buzzed. Her eyes widened at the notification, an emergency fund transfer that would cover a month's expenses. "That's too much." "It's insurance." He produced a contract, pre-printed. "Standard security agreement. You're listed as principal. 72 hours, as agreed." She read it carefully, noting the professional language, clear terms, and most importantly, her position of authority. He was giving her control, at least on paper. She signed. "Where am I staying?" "My penthouse. Secure building, private elevator, panic room." She raised an eyebrow. "Panic room?" "Among other features." His expression remained neutral, but something sparked in his eyes. "You'll be safe there." The drive to his building was quick, their convoy taking different routes to avoid patterns. The penthouse occupied the top 2 floors, all steel, glass, and sharp angles, softened by unexpected touches, hand-knotted rugs, leather-bound books, a chess set carved from jade. Guest suite, he indicated, leading her down a hallway. The room was larger than her apartment, with windows overlooking the city and a bathroom stocked with high-end toiletries. Next came his study, door reinforced and keypad locked. Armory's in here. Don't enter without me. The panic room was disguised as a wine cellar, its heavy door concealed behind wooden racks. He showed her the code, made her practice it twice. 15 minutes response time from any of my teams, he explained. Supplies for a week. Separate ventilation system. While cleaners worked on her rain-soaked coat, a woman arrived with a burner phone. She moved like a ghost, efficient and silent. Katya, she introduced herself with a slight nod. I'm handling digital security. Your regular phone stays off. Lena took the burner, already programmed with essential contacts. She called Lila immediately, keeping her voice steady as she outlined their cover story. We'll soft reopen at 3, she decided. Free donuts for the inconvenience. Should keep people focused on sugar instead of questions. Already on it, Lila replied. Doze-proofing now. After hanging up, Lena gravitated to the kitchen. It was a chef's dream. Professional-grade everything, gleaming copper, and immaculate organization. She opened cabinets, cataloging supplies, already planning what she could create here. Flour dusted her hands as she examined a bag of imported Italian 00. When she looked up, Mikhail stood in the doorway, watching her with an intensity that made her pulse jump. His eyes fixed on her cheek where flour had smudged, and the look in them was nothing like his usual controlled expression. You have... He gestured vaguely at her face, then stopped himself, hands clenching briefly before relaxing. Lena touched her cheek, felt the powder there. Hazard of the job. He nodded once sharply, then turned away. We leave at 2:20, separate cars. Pattern avoidance? Yes, he paused. Everything we do now is about patterns, creating false ones, breaking real ones, remember that. She understood. Their lives had become a chess game, each move calculated, each pattern a potential vulnerability. Even this moment, her standing in his kitchen with flour on her cheek, him looking at her like she was simultaneously a threat and a treasure, was a pattern they couldn't afford to establish. The morning stretched on as they waited for the reopen time. Lena stress-baked, filling his pristine kitchen with the scent of vanilla and browned butter. Mikhail made calls in Russian, his voice a low rumble from the study. Katya ghosted through occasionally, updating security protocols and bringing reports. At exactly 2:20 p.m., they headed down to the garage. His car left first, taking a circular route. Lena followed 10 minutes later in a different vehicle. Her burner phone silent in her pocket, the taste of fear and flour still on her tongue. The bell chimed steadily as customers filtered into butter and blood orange. Lena maintained her brightest smile, distributing fresh crullers with practiced ease. Steam rose from the golden pastries, their scent a comforting barrier against the morning's lingering tension. These are even better than usual, Lena, Mrs. Chen said, accepting her regular order, plus the free cruller. Though what's with the boards on the window? Just a minor plumbing issue. Lena's laugh came easily rehearsed. You know how old buildings are. Behind the counter, 2 of Mikhail's men posed as maintenance workers, their weapons concealed beneath blue coveralls. Mikhail himself stood by the register, his presence both reassuring and unsettling as he scanned faces with calculated precision. Her phone buzzed. Not her regular one. The burner Katya had given her. Lena's fingers trembled slightly as she opened the message. The photos hit her like a physical blow. Her mother's tree-lined street in Queens, the familiar red door of the house she'd grown up in, the rosebushes her mother tended every spring. Another shot showed her mother's car in the driveway, time-stamped from 10 minutes ago. One word accompanied the images. Return. Her throat closed. Before she could process the threat, a grinding sound emerged from the repaired mixer. Metal on metal, wrong and harsh. One of the guards, Victor she thought his name was, approached with pliers. The mixer's housing came apart under his careful manipulation. From its depths he extracted a single spent bullet. The message couldn't be clearer. They could reach her anywhere, through her equipment, her family, her life. Mikhail materialized at her side, his body angling between her and the windows. Clear the shop, he murmured to Victor in Russian, then switched to English. Lena, look at me. She did, fighting to keep her expression neutral for the remaining customers. His eyes were winter cold, but his voice stayed gentle. We're closing early, he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. Victor and the other guard began ushering people out, distributing vouchers for free pastries tomorrow. I need to warn my mother, Lena whispered once the last customer left. Call her, but not from here. Mikhail's jaw clenched as he scanned the street through the damaged window. And if you're thinking of sleeping in your apartment tonight, I wasn't. You were. His tone hardened. It would paint a target on everyone you care about. Your mother, your staff, everyone. The truth of it settled like ice in her stomach. She looked around her beloved bakery, the copper fixtures she'd polished herself, the hand-painted signs, the gallery wall of customer photos. All of it suddenly felt like it belonged to a different life. No way back, she admitted quietly. Mikhail's hand found her lower back, steering her toward the rear exit where Dima waited with the car. Make your call on the... Way, keep it light. Natural. In the back seat, Lena's fingers shook as she dialed her mother's number. 1 ring. 2. Please answer. Lenochka! Her mother's cheerful voice brought tears to Lena's eyes. She blinked them back. Hi, Mama. Just calling to let you know I'll be out of town for a few days. Big catering job up in Boston. So sudden! Will you be back for Sunday dinner? Lena swallowed hard. Probably not this week. It's a really good opportunity. High-end wedding. Well, be careful driving. The weather's supposed to turn again. I will, Mama. I love you. Love you too, Solnishko. The call ended. Lena stared at the phone, wondering if that casual exchange would be the last normal conversation she'd have with her mother for a while. The city scrolled past the tinted windows, familiar streets turning strange as they took an elaborate route back to Mikhail's building. Security protocols that had seemed excessive this morning now felt desperately necessary. At 5:12 p.m., they entered his private elevator. The doors closed with a soft whoosh, sealing them into the mirrored capsule as it rose smoothly toward the penthouse. Lena caught her reflection. Flour still on her apron, a smudge of sugar on her wrist. Next to her, Mikhail stood like a shadow, his attention divided between the floor numbers and her face. The realization hit her fully then. Her life had split in two. Everything before that text message and everything after. Before she'd been Lena Markova, baker and business owner, daughter and friend. Now she was something else. A target, a variable in someone else's equation. A woman whose ordinary life had shattered like the bakery's window. The elevator continued its ascent. Mikhail's presence beside her was solid, grounding. He'd killed 3 men to protect her last night, had stitched her wounds and given her shelter. Now he was between her and whatever threat lurked behind those photos, between her and the bullet in her mixer. She watched the floor numbers climb. 38, 39, 40. Each digit marking her rise away from her old life and into this new reality where danger wore masks and love might be a liability she couldn't afford. The elevator slowed. Mikhail shifted slightly, positioning himself to exit first. Always scanning, always protecting. His shoulder brushed hers, a brief point of warmth in the cool capsule. Lena straightened her spine. She might be leaving her old life behind, but she wouldn't cower. Whatever came next, she would face it on her feet, with flour on her hands and steel in her spine. The elevator chimed their arrival at the penthouse. As the doors opened, Lena took one last look at her reflection, at the woman she had been just hours ago, and stepped forward into her new reality. The penthouse felt hollow after dark, all glass and steel softened only by indirect lighting. Lena sat across from Mikhail at the dining table, watching him methodically work through his dinner, like he was completing a mission: grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, water, not a crumb wasted, not a moment spent savoring. You really don't eat anything sweet? She asked, pushing her own salmon around the plate. Ever? Sugar dulls reflexes. His reply was automatic, rehearsed. That's not scientifically accurate, Lena countered. The brain needs glucose. He looked up, a flash of something almost like amusement crossing his face. I get what I need. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft clink of silverware. Lena's hand drifted to her neck, fingers finding the familiar shape of her brass locket. She'd had it since childhood, a gift from her father before everything changed, but something felt off about its weight. This feels different, she murmured, more to herself than Mikhail. His attention sharpened instantly. The locket? Yes, I've worn it so long I never really thought about it, but... She turned it in her fingers. May I open it? Here? Mikhail nodded, pushing back slightly from the table to give her space, while maintaining clear sightlines to all entries. The ancient hinge creaked as she pried it open. Inside lay the expected saint's medal, tarnished and chipped at one edge. But beneath it, wedged into the backing, something caught the light. Something that shouldn't be there. There's Her fingers trembled slightly as she worked it free. It's some kind of drive? Mikhail was already moving, his dinner forgotten. Show me. She held out the tiny device, no larger than a grain of rice. His expression didn't change, but tension radiated from his shoulders. We need to check this, now. He gestured for her to follow him to his study, a room she hadn't yet seen. The study door required both a key and a fingerprint scan. Inside, monitors lined one wall, while a heavy desk dominated the space. Mikhail went straight to a laptop that sat alone on a side table, completely disconnected from any networks. Air-gapped, he explained, seeing her questioning look. Can't be traced or hacked. His fingers flew over the keyboard, decrypting the drive's contents. Numbers began scrolling across the screen. Account listings, transfer records, shell companies, wrapped in more shell companies. Lena's stomach dropped as she recognized the formatting style. This looks like... She swallowed hard. My father was an accountant. He had a specific way of organizing data. This is his work. Mikhail's hands stilled on the keyboard. The Russo familia, he said quietly. These are their laundering operations. Your father was tracking their money. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Lena gripped the edge of the desk. I haven't spoken to him in years, not since the fire. He just disappeared into his work after that. Sent birthday cards with checks. But this, you didn't know. Mikhail's voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. When she looked up, his ice blue eyes had thawed slightly. Lena, you did nothing wrong. Did nothing. She nodded, not trusting her voice. The implications were staggering. Her father had hidden evidence of mob money laundering in her locket. Had he known what would happen? Had he been trying to protect her or use her as an unwitting carrier? Mikhail was already on his phone, speaking rapid-fire Russian to someone. He switched back to English. Katya will set up rotating guards. We'll mirror the data by morning, analyze every byte. He paused, studying her face. You should try to rest. Rest? Lena laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to it. My father apparently works for the mob, there's a hit out on me, and my mixer is full of bullet holes. Sleep seems unlikely. You're safe here. He led her back to the guest suite, checking corners and shadows with practiced efficiency. I'll be right outside. No one gets through that door without going through me first. The guest room was beautiful in an impersonal way. Cream walls, cloud-soft bed, abstract art in soothing blues. Mikhail filled a glass with water and set it on the nightstand, the domestic gesture oddly touching from a man she'd watched kill 3 people yesterday. Try to sleep, he said again. Tomorrow will be complicated. Lena changed into borrowed silk pajamas, her own clothes still with the cleaners. The bed was ridiculously comfortable, but her mind raced. Through the partially open door, she could see Mikhail settle into a chair in the hallway, gun balanced across his thighs. His head tipped back against the wall, but she knew he wasn't truly relaxed. The city lights filtered through fog outside her window, turning the surrounding towers into ghost ships in a gray sea. Her phone showed 1:03 a.m., Sunday morning. Less than 48 hours ago, she'd been closing her bakery on a normal Friday night. Now she was under armed protection, her father was apparently involved with the mob, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. She watched Mikhail's profile in the hallway. Sharp jaw, warrior's posture even at rest. He'd killed to protect her, had shown more care for her safety than her own father had in years. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, she felt oddly secure, knowing he was between her and whatever threats the night might bring. The fog continued to pool around the towers as Lena finally closed her eyes, letting the steady sound of Mikhail's breathing in the hallway lull her toward sleep. Her locket lay on the nightstand, its secrets now exposed, while somewhere in the city, people were already moving against them, pieces shifting on a board she was only beginning to understand. Lena woke to gentle knocking and the rich aroma of coffee at 9:10 a.m. Sunday. Mikhail stood in the doorway, 2 steaming mugs in hand, his expression already set in mission mode. We have work to do, he said, passing her a cup. Your safety requires more than just my protection. You need skills. She sat up, noting he'd already been to the gym. His hair, slightly damp, t-shirt fresh. What kind of skills? Situational awareness first, then physical defense basics. His tone was clipped, professional. After, if you still want to check the bakery, we'll go. But training comes first. The coffee was perfect, dark roast with a splash of cream. Of course he'd noticed how she took it yesterday. And if I say no, you won't. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You're too practical for that. He was right. An hour later, they stood in his private study while he taught her to analyze rooms like a tactician. Exits, cover points, potential weapons. His voice took on a teacher's patience as he explained sightlines and corner positions. "Always know your escape routes," he said, demonstrating how to appear casual while scanning a space. "Most people see what they expect to see. Use that." Next came the gym, a sparse, equipment-filled room on the penthouse's lower level. Mikhail demonstrated basic holds and breaks, his touches clinical and brief. "Use leverage, not strength," he instructed, showing her how to break a wrist grab. "Your attacker expects you to pull away. Instead, move into their space and break their grip at the weakest point." Lena picked it up quickly, her baker's hands already strong from years of kneading dough. When she successfully broke his hold 3 times in a row, she caught a flash of approval in his eyes. "What else can I use?" she asked, thinking of her daily routine. "Everything." He listed options methodically. Keys between fingers, hot liquid throws, a strategic scream that draws attention. Your environment is your weapon. During a water break, Lena noticed his hands constantly moving, checking his phone, adjusting equipment, never truly still. An idea struck her. "Come with me," she said, leading him to the kitchen. She pulled out piping bags and meringue she'd spotted in the fridge. "Your turn to learn something." His eyebrows rose, but he followed her instructions as she demonstrated how to pipe delicate rosettes. His first attempts were clumsy, but his sniper's precision soon took over. "Pressure control is key," she explained, adjusting his grip. "Like trigger discipline, but sweeter." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Is this how you stay calm, creating beauty?" "Better than counting bodies," she countered, and was rewarded with an actual chuckle. At 2 p.m., they took a calculated risk, a walk along the waterfront, guards positioned discreetly ahead and behind. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the salt tang of the harbor. Mikhail kept a careful distance between them, his vigilance never wavering. A street vendor's face lit up as they passed. "Miss Lena, from the bakery?" Before Mikhail could intervene, the old woman pressed a paper bag into Lena's hands. "Honey cakes fresh today." "You try, yes?" Mikhail smoothly inserted himself, pulling out his wallet. "Double for the cakes," he said firmly, "but no photos." His tone was kind but final. "Once they were moving again," he explained quietly. "Faces become targets. The fewer connections visible between us, the safer you are." Lena nodded, understanding but hating the necessity. The honey cake's familiar sweetness was both comfort and reminder of how much had changed. Back at the penthouse, Mikhail received a text that shifted his entire demeanor. "There's a charity gala tonight at 8. My absence would be noticed and—" He paused. "An informant will be there with information about who planted that bullet in your mixer." "I'm coming with you," Lena said immediately. "No." "As your caterer," she pressed, "it's perfect cover. I'm known for high-end events, it won't raise questions. And I refuse to hide while others decide my fate." Their staring contest lasted 30 seconds before he relented. "3 conditions. You wear a panic button, dermal adhesive, completely concealed. You memorize every extraction route. And you stay within sight of either me or Katya at all times." "Deal." The next hour was spent studying floor plans and escape routes. The dermal button, when applied, was barely visible, a flesh-colored disc the size of a freckle behind her ear. "Press once for attention, twice for immediate extraction, 3 times for full emergency response," Mikhail explained, his fingers careful as he applied it. "The signal goes directly to my team. And you'll be working the room for information while I serve canapes and eavesdrop," Lena confirmed. While looking completely innocent and unremarkable, he emphasized. "If anything feels wrong." "Panic button, find you or Katya. Use the nearest extraction route," she recited. "I can do this, Mikhail." He studied her face for a long moment. "I know you can. That's what worries me." They spent the remaining time before preparation reviewing the guest list, identifying potential threats and allies. Lena memorized faces and names while Mikhail outlined the complex web of relationships and rivalries that defined his world. Through it all, his controlled exterior never cracked, but she caught him watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with security protocols. The crystal chandeliers cast honeyed light across the atrium's polished floors as Vancouver's elite mingled beneath soaring glass walls. Lena kept to the shadows of the service corridor, balancing trays and observing the theater of wealth around her. The catering uniform let her fade into the background, just another worker bee in the hive of luxury. Mikhail moved through the crowd like smoke, elegant, untouchable, in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. To casual observers, he was simply another wealthy patron supporting the children's hospital. But Lena saw how his eyes never stopped scanning, how he positioned himself to maintain sightlines to every entrance. The burner phone in her apron pocket vibrated. A text from Katya. "Stay mobile, eyes sharp." Lena absorbed the warning and continued her rounds, noting faces that matched the briefing photos, catching fragments of conversation about property deals and offshore accounts. Mikhail was deep in conversation with a silver-haired board member when his own phone lit up. Even across the room, Lena saw the minute tension that gripped his shoulders as he took Dima's call. His expression didn't change, but his hand tightened on his champagne flute. 3 minutes later, the first fire door slammed shut with a metallic boom that made glasses rattle. Lena's heart kicked into overdrive as shouts erupted from the loading dock, followed by the unmistakable pop of gunfire. The crowd scattered like startled birds. Mikhail crossed the space in long strides, his warm facade dropping away to reveal cold efficiency. He grabbed Lena's arm and propelled her behind a steel support column, just as bullets sparked off the metal. "Stay down," he ordered, drawing his weapon with fluid grace. The transformation was stunning. Gone was the polished businessman, replaced by a predator who moved with lethal purpose. Muzzle flashes lit the loading dock in stuttering bursts. Mikhail returned fire with precise controlled shots, each one finding its mark. His economy of movement was beautiful and terrifying. No wasted motion, no hesitation. A shadow detached itself from the chaos, rushing their position with raised weapon. Mikhail moved faster than thought. He caught the attacker's gun arm, drove an elbow into the man's solar plexus, and wrapped him in a chokehold that ended with a sharp crack. The body crumpled as Mikhail pivoted, using his broader frame to shield Lena from incoming fire. She could feel the coiled tension in his muscles, smell gunpowder and expensive cologne. His breathing remained steady, even as bullets whined past, trusting his team to handle the threat while he protected her. When silence finally fell, broken only by distant sirens, Mikhail hustled her toward the waiting extraction vehicle. Dima was behind the wheel, face grim as they peeled away from the venue. In the back seat, reality caught up with Lena. Her hands shook as she brushed crystalline debris from her hair. Mikhail did the same, his movements precise despite the adrenaline surely coursing through his system. "Moyo solnzi," he murmured, then caught himself, jaw tightening. "My son." The endearment hung between them, heavy with meaning he seemed to regret revealing. More Russian phrases followed, soft and intimate, each one making him grimace, as if the words were being torn from him against his will. Lena recognized some from her childhood. Precious one, little bird, beloved. The drive to his building passed in tense silence after that. By 9:28 p.m., they were descending into the private garage levels. Mikhail helped her from the car with gentle hands that belied his earlier violence. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, fingers skimming her arms, her sides, checking for injuries. His touch left trails of heat on her skin, even through the fabric of her uniform. Their breath mingled in the cool air as he crowded close, need warring with control in his ice-blue eyes. Lena swayed toward him instinctively, drawn by the magnetic pull between them, but Mikhail stepped back sharply, putting distance between them like a physical barrier. "Until this threat is neutralized," he said, voice rough with suppressed emotion, "I won't let my desire for you make you vulnerable. You're too important." Turning to his assembled team, he barked orders in clipped tones. "Trace tonight's shooters, someone tipped them off about the gala, find out who, how, and why. I want names within 24 hours. The garage echoed with purposeful movement as his people dispersed to their tasks. Lena watched Mikhail direct the operation with military precision, knowing he was right about the danger but aching at the space he forced between them. Glass dust sparkled in his dark hair like stars, a reminder of how close they'd come to disaster. Yet even as he coordinated the investigation, his gaze kept returning to her. Hungry, protective, and filled with a longing he refused to indulge while enemies circled. Katya appeared at Lena's elbow with a tablet displaying security footage. "Sir, we have vehicle descriptions and partial plates. Dima's already running them. Good. Double the watch rotation tonight. No one gets within 2 blocks without clearance." Mikhail's commands were swift and absolute. "And get 8 working on the venue's camera feeds. I want to know every face that entered that building in the past 48 hours. The garage hummed with focused energy as his team executed their assignments. Through it all, Lena felt the weight of Mikhail's attention, a tangible thing that warmed her skin even as he maintained his careful distance. The space between them crackled with unspoken words and untested promises, a dance of restraint that grew more difficult with each passing hour. The penthouse kitchen glowed softly at 11:10 p.m., city lights filtering through rain-streaked windows. Lena stood at the counter, measuring honey into her tea while Mikhail maintained his careful orbit around her, like a planet bound by gravity but afraid to fall. "This distance thing," she said, setting down her spoon with a decisive clink. "It's getting old." Mikhail's shoulders tensed. "It's necessary." "Is it?" "Because from where I'm standing, we're both starving for no good reason." She turned to face him, hip propped against the marble. "You stay just far enough away to make it hurt. Then look at me like I'm water in a desert." His hands flexed at his sides. "Lena!" "No. Tell me why. The real reason." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft patter of rain. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, rough with memory. "I was 15 when the fire took everything. My sister, my parents, our home, gone in minutes." His eyes fixed on some distant point. "I learned that night that love is just leverage, a weakness others exploit." "The things you care about become targets." Lena's breath caught. "The same fire that— Yes, the same one you survived." His gaze found hers, intense and haunted. "I swore after that I would never be vulnerable again, would never give anyone that power over me. I've never—" He paused, jaw working. "I've never been with anyone. By choice. Not until I could be certain I could protect what was mine." The confession hung in the air between them. Lena's sarcasm melted into something softer, more reverent. She stepped closer, watching his pupils dilate. 15 years of choosing to be alone," she murmured. "That's a long time to deny yourself connection." It wasn't denial. It was preparation. His voice roughened. Training, building power, creating a fortress nothing could breach. Another step brought her within arm's reach. And now? Now! His breath hitched as she moved closer. "Now you're here, and every wall I built feels like paper." Lena reached up, fingers hovering near his jaw. "May I?" The muscle there jumped, but he nodded. She traced his cheek, feeling stubble and warm skin. His eyes fell closed at her touch. "You don't have to keep punishing yourself," she whispered. "Some things are worth the risk." His hands came up slowly, telegraphing each movement. "May I touch you?" The formal request sent heat blooming through her chest. "Yes." His palms framed her face with exquisite care, as if she were made of spun glass. When he finally lowered his mouth to hers, the kiss was achingly gentle, a question rather than a demand. Lena melted into him, answering with soft pressure. His control wavered, fingers tightening fractionally before he forced them to relax. She could feel the restraint in every line of his body as he kept the kiss slow, exploratory. Each touch was preceded by a murmured request for permission. "Can I hold you closer?" "Is this okay?" His consideration made her heart ache even as it stoked the fire between them. They traded kisses against the counter, learning each other's boundaries with careful attention. His hand stayed respectfully above her clothes, but even those careful touches left trails of heat on her skin. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. His pupils were blown wide, turning his ice-blue eyes nearly black. "I want to do this right," he said roughly. "Give me one night, let my team secure the city's loose ends, eliminate immediate threats. Our first time shouldn't be tangled with fear or rushed because of danger." Lena touched her swollen lips, understanding the gift he was offering, the chance to have this without looking over their shoulders. "After," she agreed, voice husky. "When it can be just us." His smile was slow and aching. "After," he echoed, like a promise. They stayed close for another moment, sharing breath and heat before responsibility reasserted itself. At 12:01 a.m., Monday, they separated with visible reluctance. Lena headed to the guest room, taking her charged phone and placing the locket carefully on the nightstand. Through the wall, she could hear Mikhail moving in his office, the soft murmur of his voice as he coordinated with his team. She lay in the dark, fingers pressed to her lips where she could still feel his kisses. The memory of his careful touches, his constant requests for consent, warmed her, even as sleep pulled at her consciousness. In his office, Mikhail combed through security feeds until his vision blurred, searching for any threat to their promised after. The taste of honey lingered on his tongue from her tea-sweet kisses. Near 3 a.m., exhaustion finally claimed them both. Lena drifted off to the distant hum of the building's systems, while Mikhail dozed at his desk, one hand near his weapon and the other touching his lips, remembering the feel of finally letting someone past his walls. The city sprawled below, its dangers temporarily held at bay by rain and darkness. In the space between their separate rooms, promise hung like perfume, the anticipation of after, keeping them both warm despite the distance they'd agreed to maintain for one more night. The building's steady thrum wrapped around them like a lullaby, its security system scanning the streets below while they slept. Their phones stayed silent, no alerts breaking the peace they'd carved out of this dangerous night. For these few hours, they could rest in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring them closer to their after, when walls could finally fall and 15 years of solitude could end in trust and touch and connection. The morning news droned quietly in the penthouse living room. Lena stirred her coffee, only half listening until a particular segment caught her attention. The reporter discussed the anniversary of an apartment complex fire from 15 years ago. Images flashed across the screen. Orange flames licking dark windows, firefighters' silhouettes against smoke. Something tickled at the edges of her memory. A forgotten dream, maybe. Or she absently rubbed her ankle where an old scar marked the skin. The memory hit her like a wave, choking smoke, terrifying heat, and a boy's face streaked with ash. His eyes had been startlingly blue, even through the haze. Mikhail entered from his study, tablet in hand. He paused when he saw her transfixed expression. "The Preston Street fire," Lena said softly. "I was there." His tablet clattered to the coffee table. "What?" She pulled up her pant leg, revealing the small, curved scar. "I got this climbing out, but I didn't climb out alone." She looked up at him. "Someone carried me," a boy with ash on his eyelashes. Mikhail's carefully neutral expression cracked. He sank onto the couch beside her, his normally steady hands trembling slightly. "Third floor, corner unit." "Yes." Her breath caught. "That was you?" "I heard screaming." His voice was rough. "Two voices, children. I got to one." Pain flashed across his face. "But my sister, I couldn't find her. I failed her." "Masha," Lena whispered, remembering the name from news reports. He nodded once, sharp and pained. "I've remembered your face for 15 years, the one life I managed to save that night." His fingers hovered near her ankle but didn't touch. "I didn't recognize you at first. You were so small then. And you were my hero." She caught his hand, pressed it to her scar. "Still are, apparently." The touch seemed to break something in him. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I thought I'd lost everyone that night. But you found me again." She curled into him, feeling the years collapse between them. Maybe it was always supposed to be this way. They stayed tangled together on the couch as morning stretched toward noon. The revelation reframed everything. Their instant connection, his fierce protectiveness, her instinctive trust despite the danger. Not random obsession, but something older. Faded. "Tell me about her," Lena said softly. "Masha." Mikhail's thumb traced circles on her palm as he spoke. "She loved ballet, practiced in the kitchen using the counter as a bar, made me play Tchaikovsky on repeat until I thought I'd go mad." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "She was fearless. Would have ruled the world if—" When his voice cracked, Lena squeezed his hand. "My father taught me to bake," she offered in exchange. "Before he lost himself in numbers and secrets, we'd make black bread every Sunday." "Black bread kept me alive after," Mikhail admitted. "When I couldn't stomach anything else, the woman who took me in, she'd leave it by my bed. For me, it was my mother's dill soup. Still make it when I'm sick." Lena shifted closer. Food remembers what we sometimes can't. They traded stories of lost families and the meals that sustained them through grief. Mikhail described learning to shoot to protect what remained, while Lena talked about turning her father's accounting lessons toward keeping her bakery alive. At noon, Katya arrived with a stack of files and a grim expression. She laid out her analysis connecting the microdrive's numbers to shell corporations run by Salvatore Russo, the rival Don who'd been pushing at Volkov territory. "There's more," Katya said, hesitating. "We've been tracking unusual patterns. Yuri has been meeting with Russo's men." "Impossible." Mikhail's denial was instant. "He practically raised me after the fire. He's family." "The surveillance doesn't lie." Katya spread photos across the coffee table. Yuri in restaurant private rooms, parking garages, making exchanges. Mikhail's jaw clenched. "Keep watching him. Quietly. I need to be certain before—" He didn't finish the sentence. Lena watched pain flash across his face again, the possibility of another betrayal by family. She squeezed his hand, offering silent support. By late afternoon, the weight of revelations and suspicions hung heavy in the air. Lena needed to reclaim some normalcy. She headed to the penthouse's professional kitchen, pulling out flour and butter. "What are you doing?" Mikhail asked from the doorway. "Monday is staff night at the bakery." She tied on an apron. "Just because we're in lockdown doesn't mean traditions stop. Help me with the mise en place." He moved through the kitchen with military precision, measuring ingredients as she directed. Soon the space filled with the scent of vanilla and caramelizing sugar. Lena showed him how to fold laminated dough, her hands guiding his through the motions. Outside the windows, daylight drained from the sky, replaced by the city's neon glow. But inside, the kitchen smelled like home, like memory and possibility combined. Like black bread and dill soup and all the ways food could heal what was broken. Mikhail watched her work, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. When she dusted flour from his shirt, his hand caught hers, holding it against his heart. They stood suspended in that moment while the oven timer counted down and the city light sparkled beyond the glass. In the warm kitchen air, their shared past and present twined together like rising dough, childhood trauma and adult danger, loss and protection, the boy with ash-streaked lashes and the man who would kill to keep her safe. The revelation of their connection didn't simplify anything, but it made the complexity feel right. Inevitable even. At 9:20 p.m., the penthouse settled into a different kind of quiet. Guards patrolled outside while city maps covered the corkboard, red pins marking safe zones and potential threats. But inside, the air shifted with possibility. Lena sat beside Mikhail on the leather couch, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. His fingers brushed her cheek, tender despite their capability for violence. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with restraint. She nodded, turning into his touch. "Yes." The first press of his lips was careful, questioning. When she responded, drawing closer, his control wavered. His hands framed her face as though she were precious, breakable. But Lena wasn't fragile. She pressed harder, showing him she wouldn't shatter. "Solnishko," he murmured against her mouth. "It means little sun." "Teaching me Russian pet names?" She smiled against his lips. "Only the ones that suit you." His thumb traced her bottom lip. Bright, warm, essential. They kept it slow, deliberate. Each touch was a question and answer, building trust through permission. His fingers tangled in her hair as she explored the strong line of his jaw, the hollow of his throat. When she grazed his pulse point, his breath caught. "Good?" she asked. "Perfect," he answered, voice rough. "You're perfect." They traded praise like secrets, erasing doubt with words and touch. Mikhail's hands stayed respectful, but his kisses grew deeper, hungrier. Lena met his intensity, showing him that desire wasn't weakness. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lena rested, her forehead against his. "We should probably cool down." He nodded, though his hands lingered on her waist. Wise decision. They slid to sit on the floor, backs against the couch. Lena reached for the box of almond croissants she'd baked earlier, still slightly warm. She broke one in half, offering him the larger piece. "The world would never believe this," she said, watching him savor the buttery layers. The feared Mikhail Volkov eating pastries on the floor. He smiled, a rare sight that transformed his face. "They expect a monster. And I'm supposed to be some innocent angel he's corrupting." She rolled her eyes. "People love simple stories." "Nothing simple about us." He brushed a crumb from her lip. "But I prefer it that way." "We're just two people refusing to break." Lena leaned into his shoulder. "Making our own rules." They discussed tomorrow's plan between bites of croissant. They would leak selected data from the drive to a neutral journalist, someone with enough integrity to investigate, but not enough connections to be compromised. The story would smoke out whoever was feeding information to Russo. "My team will shadow the journalist," Mikhail said. "Watch who approaches after the story drops, while we maintain our routine to avoid tipping anyone off." Lena nodded. "Smart." They spent the next hour refining details, Mikhail's tactical mind meshing with Lena's understanding of social dynamics. By 11:58 p.m., they had a solid strategy. "I'll get us some water," Lena said, standing. Her legs had gone numb from sitting on the floor. The kitchen was dark except for city light through the windows. As she reached for glasses, something white caught her eye. A paper slipped under the service entrance. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. The handwriting was instantly familiar, though she hadn't seen it in years. Her father's precise accountant's script: "Meet me to keep him safe, 12:20 a.m. Service dock." The timestamp gave her 20 minutes. Her mind raced through options. Waking Mikhail would mean gunfire in his home, potential civilian casualties. His people would shoot first, ask questions later, and if her father had vital information... She slipped her panic button into her bra, a compromise between caution and necessity. Her phone lit up with a quick text: "Bathroom, back in a minute." The elevator waited, silent and chrome. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she pressed the button for the service level. The numbers counted down, each flash bringing her closer to answers, or danger. She thought of Mikhail upstairs, probably already growing suspicious of her absence. The man who had carried her from fire as a boy, who touched her now like she was precious but not fragile. The man who would tear the city apart if anything happened to her. But she couldn't let him fight her battles, couldn't hide behind his protection while others paid the price. If her father had information that could keep Mikhail safe, she had to know. The elevator slowed. Lena took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. She was no helpless princess. She had Mikhail's training, her own wits, and a direct line to help if things went wrong. Sometimes the bravest thing was choosing to act instead of react. The doors opened onto the service dock's shadowed concrete. Her shoes made soft sounds against the floor as she stepped out, scanning for movement. The loading bay door was closed, security lights casting yellow pools between darker shadows. A clock on the wall read 12:19 a.m. In her chest, her heart kept its frantic rhythm, counting down seconds to either answers or ambush. The panic button pressed against her skin, a small comfort as she moved forward into whatever waited in the dark. This was no fairy tale with monsters and angels, just real people making hard choices, refusing to break under pressure. She'd survived fire once with a boy who became her protector. Now it was her turn to protect what mattered, whatever the cost. The service dock's fluorescent lights cast sickly shadows across the concrete floor. Lena's footsteps echoed in the cavernous space as she checked her phone. 12:18 a.m. The panic button pressed against her skin beneath her bra, a small comfort in the emptiness. Movement flickered in her peripheral vision. Before she could turn, a familiar voice spoke from the shadows. "Little Baker?" Yuri stepped into the light, his usually warm smile now cold and calculating. Two men flanked him, their faces expressionless. "Your father sends his regrets." Lena's stomach dropped. The note, the handwriting she'd thought was her father's, had been forged. She'd walked right into their trap. "You betrayed him!" The words tasted bitter. "Betrayed the family!" "Business is business," Yuri shrugged. "And you're worth more than loyalty." She spun to run, but her legs tangled as rough hands grabbed her shoulders. A van door slid open behind her with a metallic screech. Someone yanked a black bag over her head, cutting off her vision. "Mikhail will give us the shipping routes to get you back," a voice hissed in her ear. "He always was weak for pretty things." They shoved her into the van. The engine rumbled to life as zip ties bit into her wrists. She tried to count turns, track their direction, but the driver took random routes to confuse her sense of direction. At 12:26 a.m., they dragged her into what felt like a warehouse, the acoustics hollow, the air stale. They secured her to a chair, the metal cold through her clothes. When they ripped off the hood, harsh light assaulted her eyes. Someone tore the locket from her neck, the chain snapping. "Got it!" Metal clicked as they pried it open. "Drive's here." A camera on a tripod blinked red, its lens fixed on her face. She lifted her chin, refusing to show fear. Back in the penthouse, Mikhail glanced at his phone, 12:29 a.m. The text from Lena still showed one checkmark, unread. "Bathroom," it said. Something felt wrong. He strode to the hallway, checking the guest bath. Empty. The kitchen, too. His gaze caught on something in the trash. The corner of a paper, familiar handwriting visible. The note confirmed his worst fears. Mikhail's careful control shattered. His roar of rage echoed through the penthouse as he slammed his fist into the wall. "Lock down the building!" he bellowed into his phone. "No one in or out. Check every camera feed from the last hour." His team scrambled to comply as he made calls, voice clipped with barely contained fury. Every dock worker who owed him favors, every street sweeper who took his money, every homeless person who served as his eyes, he activated them all. "Find her," he ordered. "Search every warehouse, every boat, every rat hole on the coast." His phone buzzed at 1:40 a.m. A video link, his jaw clenched as he opened it. Lena appeared on screen, tied to a chair, but head high. Relief at seeing her alive warred with murderous rage at the bruise darkening her cheek. "Hello, old friend." Yuri's voice dripped false warmth. "She's quite spirited, your little baker. Now, about those shipping routes." Mikhail's face could have been carved from stone. 4 hours, he told his lieutenants. "Find the auction location. I don't care what it costs." In his bedroom vault, he methodically laid out equipment. Kevlar vest, ceramic plates, knives balanced for throwing and clothes work. His fingers lingered on a silver ring, its surface etched with Cyrillic script, his sister's name. "Sir," Dima appeared in the doorway. "First reports coming in from the docks." Mikhail nodded, his movements precise as he checked weapons. He would appear to honor the trade. But Yuri had forgotten the first rule of the families. Betrayal earns only blood. In the warehouse, Lena tested her bonds, mind racing. The zip ties had minimal give. 3 men guarded the door, 2 more by the camera. Yuri paced, checking his phone. She remembered Mikhail's lessons from yesterday. Leverage, not strength. Look for advantages. Use what you have. Her fingers brushed against the panic button, still hidden in her bra. They hadn't searched her thoroughly enough. The warehouse echoed with footsteps and muttered conversations. She caught fragments about an auction, multiple buyers interested in both her and the drive. Yuri was playing both sides, using her to control Mikhail while selling the drive's information to rivals. Light filtered through high windows, showing glimpses of container cranes. The sound of distant ships' horns meant they were still near water. She memorized every detail, knowing Mikhail would need them. Her cheek throbbed where they'd struck her for fighting back during the capture. But the pain just fed her anger, kept her mind sharp. She wasn't some helpless bargaining chip. Yuri approached, his expensive shoes clicking on concrete. "Comfortable?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Don't worry, it won't be long." Mikhail always did have a weakness for saving people. Though he couldn't save his sister, could he? Lena met his gaze steadily. "You really don't know him at all." "I raised him." Yuri's face hardened. "Taught him everything he knows about power." "Then you should be very afraid," Lena said softly. "Because he's learned new lessons since then?" Yuri's hand twitched, as if he wanted to strike her again, but the camera was still rolling. He needed her unmarked for now. Instead, he checked his watch and walked away, speaking quietly into his phone. The red camera light continued to blink, counting down minutes until whatever came next. But Lena had survived fire once before. She would survive this too. The interrogation room reeked of copper and fear. Mikhail stood motionless, watching the ledger boy tremble. "I swear I didn't know they'd take her." Blood trickled from the boy's split lip. "They just said to plant the bullet, make it look like a message." Mikhail's voice remained eerily calm. "The location." "Pier 37, the boy choked out. "Old cannery, there's a basement level they converted. Please, I have a sister." "So did I." Mikhail stepped back, checking his watch. 6:05 a.m. 4 hours of precision violence had yielded results. Dima entered, tablet in hand. "Confirmed. Salvatore's splitting the sale. Drive goes to the Albanians, the girl to the Czechs. Maximum disruption to our territory." Mikhail's jaw tightened. They meant to tear his world apart, piece by piece. "Status on her mother?" "Katya's team is moving her now. Clean extraction, no traces." He nodded, already mapping contingencies. "The bakery?" "Paperwork's done. Property transferred to a trust in her name." Dima hesitated. "You sure about that in-case part?" Mikhail didn't answer. Instead, he walked to his office, each step measured. The morning light painted harsh shadows across his desk where he'd laid out the tools of war, blueprints, thermal images, guard rotations. He knelt, pressing his lips to the small dent in his palm where Lena's locket had bit into his flesh when he'd clenched his fist. "I'm coming," he whispered to the empty air. A promise. A prayer. Rising, he moved with mechanical precision, body armor, weapons check, comms test. His mind cataloged entry points and kill zones while his heart burned with a single purpose: bring her home. At 7:10 a.m., he met Dima in the garage, their breath fogged in the pre-dawn chill as they loaded gear into unmarked vans. 2 teams, Mikhail outlined. Alpha takes the main floor, Beta sweeps the basement. I lead Beta. His finger traced routes on the blueprint. Primary entry through the loading dock, secondary through the roof access. Contingencies? Dima checked magazines with practiced hands. Fire protocol in place. Harbor Patrol's been paid to look the other way if we need flood measures. Mikhail's expression hardened. No one leaves that building without my clearance. They worked in silence, checking equipment. Body cameras, flashbangs, breaching charges. Each piece another link in the chain of violence about to unfold. The fog was burning off the water as they finished preparations. Mikhail paused, his hand resting on a tactical vest. For a moment, he could almost hear Lena's voice, teasing, concerned, asking if he'd eaten breakfast. The ghost of her touch seemed to linger on his cheek. The memory steeled him. She'd survived fire as a child. He'd failed to save one sister. He wouldn't fail again. Sir. Dima held out a briefcase. Looks like route documentation. Thermal charges inside, though. Should make a nice surprise for anyone checking. Mikhail took it, feeling the weight. The perfect bait. Seemingly valuable intel that would become a weapon. Like everything else in his world, dangerous gifts wrapped in mundane packages. His team gathered, faces grim beneath tactical gear. They knew the stakes. This wasn't just about territory or power anymore. This was personal. Comms check, Katya's voice crackled through their earpieces. Mother secure, location scrubbed, standing by with Overwatch. Mikhail touched his throat mic. Confirmed. Maintain perimeter control. No outside interference. The cannery loomed ahead, rust-streaked walls reflecting the growing dawn. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries mixing with the distant sound of boat horns. A perfect morning for violence. Team Beta split off, taking position while Alpha circled wide. Mikhail could see security patrols through his scope. Sloppy. Overconfident. They expected him to play by old rules. To negotiate. To compromise. They didn't understand that he'd already lost one family to fire. He wouldn't lose another to betrayal. The briefcase felt heavy in his hand as he approached the loading dock. Inside, charges waited to paint the walls with fire and shrapnel. A gift for those who thought they could take what was his. His watch showed 7:44 a.m. 1 minute until the breach. 1 minute until he reminded everyone why the Volkov name commanded fear. 1 minute until he brought his baker home. The sun broke through the fog, catching on broken windows like shattered diamonds. Mikhail thought of Lena's smile, of flour on her cheek, of promises whispered in the dark. His expression settled into marble stillness. On my mark, he breathed into the calm. The teams tensed, weapons ready. In his mind, he could see Lena rolling her eyes at his dramatics while sneaking him pastries, insisting he needed to eat even during a rescue mission. The thought almost made him smile. Almost. But there would be time for smiles later, time for soft words and gentle touches. For now, there was only the cold clarity of violence and the weight of that briefcase in his hand as he walked into the lion's mouth, ready to paint the walls red. The harbor breeze carried the scent of salt and rust as his watch ticked toward 7:45 a.m. Behind him, his men waited for the signal. Before him, the cannery held his heart behind concrete and steel. All the pieces were in place. Time to remind everyone why you never steal from a Volkov. The basement air hung thick with diesel fumes and rust, coating Lena's tongue with metallic bitterness. Her wrists burned from working the bobby pin against plastic zip ties. But Mikhail's lessons echoed in her mind. Leverage, not strength. Patience over panic. The guard paced, features slack with boredom. She'd spent the last hour playing helpless, whimpering just enough to become background noise. Her fingers found the lighter she'd palmed from his jacket during a theatrical stumble. The med cart beside her gleamed with promise. Antiseptic, alcohol, flammable solutions in neat rows. Please, she called out, voice cracking. Water, just a sip. He approached with the predicted eye roll. Perfect. In one fluid motion, she swung her bound hands up, splashing alcohol across his chest. The lighter sparked, flames erupted, chaos exploded, sprinklers hissed to life, filling the air with artificial rain. Men shouted, boots thundering on concrete. Through the confusion, she spotted Yuri's familiar silhouette and felt cold rage. The broken chair beside her offered a weapon. She yanked free a splintered leg. Yuri's face twisted when he saw her free. He lunged, but she was ready. The makeshift stake plunged into his thigh. His howl of pain was deeply satisfying. She ran, feet slipping on wet concrete, heart hammering against her ribs. The basement was a maze of support columns and abandoned equipment. Left, right, straight. She mapped escape routes like Mikhail had taught her. The impact nearly knocked her down. Strong hands steadied her, and she found herself staring into familiar ice-blue eyes. Mikhail. Relief flooded her system even as bullets sparked off nearby metal. Down! Dima's voice cracked like a whip. They dropped as rounds peppered the wall above them. A heavy impact rocked Mikhail. He grunted, stumbling. The vest had caught it, but the force drove the air from his lungs. Lena grabbed his arm, helping him stay upright as they pushed toward the stairwell. Above, Katya's team laid down covering fire. The precise, controlled bursts forced Salvatore's men into cover, creating a corridor of relative safety. They moved as one unit, Mikhail's hand firm on her back, Dima watching their six. The stairwell echoed with gunfire and footsteps. Water from the sprinklers ran down the walls in grimy rivulets. They cleared each landing methodically, falling into a rhythm. Move, check, advance. At 7:59, they found Yuri trying to limp into a freight elevator. Blood darkened his pant leg where Lena had stabbed him. His smile was ugly when he saw Mikhail. Still playing protector? Yuri's voice dripped contempt. Like with your sister. How did that work out? Mikhail's face went blank. That dangerous stillness Lena had learned to read. His hand tightened on his weapon. No. Lena stepped between them, hands raised. Water dripped from her hair, but her voice was steady. He doesn't get to poison this. We're better than his games. For a moment, she thought Mikhail might push past her. Then his shoulders relaxed fractionally. He moved with cold efficiency, disarming Yuri and securing him with reinforced cuffs. Every legal avenue, Mikhail promised in a low voice. Every financial weapon, every political connection, you'll live to see everything you built torn down legally piece by piece. A crash from the next room had them spinning, weapons ready. But the figure that stumbled through the doorway wasn't a threat. Moya doch, Pavel Markov whispered, swaying. My daughter. Lena caught her father as his legs gave out. Blood stained his shirt, not life-threatening, but enough to weaken him. His familiar features were lined with exhaustion and regret. The locket, he murmured. I'm so sorry. I thought I could protect you by hiding it there. Instead, I painted a target on your back. Lena held him, throat tight with competing emotions. Anger at his choices, warred with relief at finding him alive. We'll talk about it later, she said finally. Let's get out of here first. Mikhail coordinated their exit through his comm, while Dima helped support Pavel. The building groaned around them, smoke thick in the air despite the sprinklers. Emergency lights cast everything in surreal red shadows. They emerged at 8:22 into painful morning brightness. Sirens wailed, their lights strobing against the cannery's weathered walls. Salt air cut through the smoke, making Lena's eyes water, or maybe those were real tears, finally falling now that the danger had passed. Medical teams swarmed forward. Pavel was eased onto a gurney. Yuri was secured in a transport vehicle. Katya's people maintained a protective perimeter, while evidence teams began their work. Lena watched smoke billow against the blue sky, feeling the weight of the past few days settle into her bones. Her clothes were soaked, her skin smudged with soot. But she was alive. They all were. Mikhail appeared at her side, close enough that their shoulders brushed. He seemed unable to stop touching her, small points of contact as if reassuring himself she was real. His vest bore an ugly impact mark over his ribs, but his breathing was steady. They stood together as organized chaos flowed around them. The morning sun painted the harbor in gold, catching on broken windows and wet pavement. Somewhere, gulls cried out over the water, oblivious to the human drama below. The breeze carried away wisps of smoke, revealing glimpses of clear sky. Lena leaned slightly against Mikhail's solid presence, letting his warmth chase away the last of the basement's chill. They had survived. They had won. Everything else, her father's choices, Yuri's betrayal, the drive's contents, could wait. By 10:10 a.m. Wednesday, sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows, casting warm patches across the kitchen's marble counters. The scent of fresh cinnamon rolls filled the air. Lena's way of finding normalcy after chaos. Her hands still remembered the motions, even when her mind was elsewhere. The private clinic felt like a distant dream now. They'd spent hours there, while doctors cleaned and stitched Pavel's wound, the steady beep of monitors a counterpoint to his quiet confession. Under guard, he'd given his statement, detailing years of gathering evidence against Salvatore's network, his voice rough with regret when explaining how he'd hidden the drive in Lena's locket. Yuri's transfer to the task force had been clinical and cold. Mikhail had watched through mirrored glass as his former confidant was processed, his face carved from stone. The evidence file they'd assembled from the drive would dismantle Salvatore's empire, brick by brick, all through legal channels, a bloodless execution that would hurt more than any bullet. Throughout the night, Lena had drifted in and out of sleep, pressed against Mikhail's side, careful of his bruised ribs. His heartbeat under her ear had been steady, grounding. When nightmares threatened, he'd stroked her hair, murmuring soft Russian endearments until she settled. Now, morning light painted everything in gentle gold. Steam rose from fresh coffee as Mikhail placed 2 envelopes on the counter with deliberate care. The first contained the deed to the entire block housing Butter and Blood Orange, prime real estate now legally hers. The second held something equally precious, grant papers for a community kitchen that would serve as a sanctuary for those needing warmth and connection. "These are yours," Mikhail said quietly. "No strings, no obligations. 1 envelope, both or neither. The choice is yours." His eyes were soft as he watched her. "My love isn't conditional on your answer." Lena traced the edges of both envelopes, feeling the weight of what they represented. Not chains, but wings. Not a cage, but a foundation to build from. She looked up at him, this dangerous man who touched her with such gentleness. "Both," she said firmly, "and you. Always you." His smile was quick and fierce. From his pocket, he withdrew her locket, newly repaired. The brass gleamed as if it had been polished, the hinge strong again. With careful fingers, he clasped it around her neck, letting his touch linger on her pulse point. Then he reached into his pocket again. The ring he held caught the morning light, platinum and sapphires, elegant without being ostentatious. Not a trophy, but a promise. He slid it onto her finger with trembling hands. "Navzegda," he growled, the Russian rolling deep in his chest. "Forever." The public reopening that afternoon was a calculated show of strength. Mikhail stood at her side as she cut the ribbon, his presence both protective and possessive. The message was clear to anyone watching. Touch her and die. The charity angle provided perfect cover while establishing new territory lines. Lena moved through the crowd with practiced ease, serving samples and accepting. "Congratulations!" But her awareness never left Mikhail. He orbited her like a planet around its sun, maintaining perfect distance while remaining constantly vigilant. Their eyes met across the room between well-wishers. Heat flared between them, a promise of later that made her breath catch. When the last guest finally left and the doors were locked, the tension was nearly unbearable. The ride up to the penthouse was silent, charged with anticipation. As soon as they stepped inside, Mikhail's control, that iron discipline that defined him, began to crack. His hands shook as he reached for her. "Tell me to stop," he whispered against her neck. "Tell me if it's too much." "Don't you dare stop," she answered, pulling him closer. They made it to the bedroom somehow, leaving a trail of clothes behind. Rain began to patter against the windows, creating a cocoon of intimate sound around them. Every touch was reverent, every kiss an exploration. Mikhail, who moved through violence with such deadly grace, handled her like she was precious beyond measure. "Can I?" he asked before each new touch. "Is this okay?" "Yes," she breathed each time. "Please." They took their time, learning each other's bodies with wonder. This man who couldn't control himself around violence discovered a different kind of surrender. The way he looked at her, like she was miracle and salvation combined, made her heart ache. "I love you," he confessed against her skin, beyond reason or control. She pulled him closer, erasing the last space between them. "Then don't try to control it. Just love me." Rain painted patterns on the windows as they moved together. The city lights blurred into a soft glow through the water-streaked glass. In this moment, there was no violence, no danger, just them, finding their way home to each other. "Not monsters," Lena whispered, remembering their conversation. "Not angels." "Just us," Mikhail agreed, his voice rough with emotion. They built their own paradise in that room, sheltered by rain and darkness. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a vow. They had survived fire and bullets to reach this moment. Whatever came next, they would face it together.